The Dark Knight, the Caped Crusader, one half of DC's famous dynamic duo. Whatever you choose to call him by, Bruce Wayne's alter ego is among those characters who have reached the absolute pinnacle of pop culture status since his debut in spring 1939's Detective Comics issue number 27. And while many Batman enthusiasts will certainly have their own master list of greatest Batman stories ever told, I'm here to give my own. Stay tuned. Hi everyone, this is Ken with Toy Connections. If you enjoyed this video and would like to be notified of my future content, please be sure to hit subscribe. Also, if you're able to help the channel grow, head over to my Patreon site and consider a monthly pledge where you'll be able to unlock exclusive content and other benefits. That's patreon.com/toyconnections. The link is in the description below, as is the list of names for this channel's existing Patreon supporters. I'll start by saying that any list is at least a little subjective, and that my list here isn't necessarily ordered in terms of the greatest, and I'm using air quotes when I use the word greatest. That's because if the criteria was only a pure combination of cultural significance and lasting impact, then I would say that the top 3 books are right here, and arguably fixed in place due to their seemingly perpetual influence on the Batman franchise. Instead, as a person who has read Batman stories since childhood, the order of this list is based largely on my own personal entertainment and repeat readability factor, in terms of being stories that I reach for on the bookshelf time and again, which often leads to me recommending these to friends and other people. I have read these stories multiple times, and for the purpose of this list, I will stick to story arcs that are generally compiled in a self-contained form rather than single issues. So, let's begin. In at number 10, Batman Dark Victory, a 14-issue run released between 1999 and 2000. This story comes off the heels of the largely successful Batman The Long Halloween story arc. Written by Jeph Loeb and with artwork by Tim Sale, this story revisits and revitalizes the origin of Dick Grayson as Robin, but now in a modern setting. Dick's relationship with Bruce Wayne and Alfred is established for future stories, and Batman follows a series of mysterious murders by an unidentified killer simply going by the name of the Hangman Killer. We do see a turf war of sorts between Two-Face and the remaining members of the Falcone crime family, as Batman pieces together the clues to identify just who is the Hangman Killer, as well as the killer's motives, and to stop the spree of murders on the victims, many of whom are both current as well as former Gotham Police City officers. Number 9. Batman the Man Who Laughs. This story is set early in the career of the Dark Knight, and Batman's rogues gallery up to this point primarily consists of mob factions involved in the more traditional organized crime syndicates. While we as readers and fans are trained to see Batman and Joker as perpetual enemies, we forget that at some point, Batman had to make the switch from dealing with the corrupt gangsters to dealing with maniacal, unique villains such as the Joker. As it is their first encounter, we see a Bruce Wayne who isn't used to dealing with the insane clown prince and having to improvise from his usual strategies. We see the use of Joker's lethal laughing gas as he makes victims of Gotham's high-level personalities, all culminating in a showdown between Batman and Joker at the Gotham City Viaduct. Written by the ultra-talented Ed Brubaker and with art by Doug Mankey, this story is an absolutely great companion piece to the more established Killing Joke one-shot comic and is a perfect follow-up tale to Batman Year One. Number 8. Batman the Black Mirror. While other writers have established themselves previously as quintessential Batman authors, Scott Snyder is firmly at or near the top of this list for stories such as this one. This story is unique in that it follows Dick Grayson rather than Bruce Wayne as Batman, which is something that had been established before in the multitude of issues leading up to this. While Bruce Wayne has indeed returned to the land of the living prior to this tale, it is still up to Dick Grayson to lead an investigation centering around illegal weapons procurement at a place known as the Mirror House, with items being sold by a mysterious villain simply called the Dealer. Perhaps the real gem of this story, though, is the reintroduction of James Gordon Jr., the son of Commissioner Gordon and brother of Barbara Gordon. Now, as this story clearly takes place many years past some of our favorite early story arcs, James Jr. is now an adult with a criminal and psychotic past, who has returned to complicate the lives of his father, sister, and Gotham City by extension. We see an emotional tale of confrontation culminating in a violent familial struggle, and we are left with even more empathy for the Gordon family than before, who by this point had already experienced a very difficult history, despite remaining heroes at the forefront of DC Comics lore. Number 7. Arkham Asylum, a serious house on a serious earth. Now, while I've personally found Grant Morrison's stories a bit on the complex side, this earlier work of his from 1986 remains my favorite among Batman titles that he has authored. Morrison is paired with artist Dave McKean, who does an incredible job of capturing the dark and ominous nature of Arkham Asylum Institute, making this story all the more compelling. We follow Batman, who answers the call that a riot has broken out at the asylum, with the staff threatened by its inmates, who Batman encounters one by one. However, the depth of the story is expanded by the history we are introduced to of that of Amadeus Arkham, the Asylum's founder and whom it was named after. You will get the chills like I did as you read the story of the troubled past that Amadeus Arkham endured, all while shifting back and forth between past and present timelines to ultimately tie this captivating story together. And while I've heard that this story is considered out of continuity at the time of its publication, I do think it can fall not too far after The Killing Joke in terms of reading order without seeming too out of place, but that is just a personal preference of my own. The influence of this story has also spawned the Arkham Asylum video game series, which are loosely based on this original comic. If you can, certainly play those games, as I did get around to playing the first few and enjoyed them quite a bit, just as I did with the comic. In at number 6 is The Killing Joke. Now, as I did show earlier, if we are talking about overall franchise impact, this should be a top 3 book. And while I enjoy it to the point of having it earn a very respectable place on this list, there are other stories that I prefer to read for pure entertainment factor, which I'll be getting to shortly. We know Alan Moore for his work on Watchmen, V for Vendetta, and Swamp Thing, and his take on Batman here is certainly worth a read, to say the least. This book is largely driven by the insanity and maniacal psychology of the Joker, and further pushes to the forefront the Joker as a top-notch villain not only in DC Comics lore, but for pop culture in general. It answers the question of just how far one can push a good-natured man like Commissioner Gordon close to the brink with acts of mental torture. We do see flashbacks detailing the Joker's origin before his days as the insane clown prince, and it does allow readers to sympathize with the man before his days as Gotham City's primary antagonist. And no, this next part is not a spoiler since it occurs near the start of the book and is part of the book's further plot establishment of future stories, but this story does see the Joker cripple and paralyze Barbara Gordon, definitively ending her career as Batgirl, which DC Comics would creatively reestablish her as the Oracle character later on, and it also contributes to the emotional torture that the Joker would place on Commissioner James Gordon and his family. In short, read this story. You will be glad that you did. Number 5, The Dark Knight Returns. Okay, just like The Killing Joke, this story's cultural significance alone would have put it higher on the list, and possibly even number 1, though for me personally there are other stories that I like ever so marginally more. To me, the fact that there are this many must-read stories in the Batman franchise shows the quality group of writers that DC has chosen over the years to tell his tales. Author Frank Miller reestablishes Batman as a dark, brooding hero here, as up to this point, Batman had become something of a cartoony, campy character who many people mostly familiarized themselves with through Adam West's portrayal in the 1966 television series. For this story, we follow a now aged, previously retired Batman in his mid-50s returning to fight crime while a dominant gang known as the Mutants controls much of Gotham City. We see an exciting fight between Batman and the mutant gang leader, with Batman relying more on wit and strategy since he is no longer in his physical prime. We see the first female Robin in Carrie Kelly, and also a showdown between Batman vs. Superman, a story that would play itself out in the 2016 film. The dark nature of this comic series would also see many elements of its plot resurface in other forms of media, such as The Dark Knight Rises in 2012, where Batman returns after a similarly extended absence. Ultimately, the way this plays out is much like a farewell and retirement tale for the Batman, and unofficially serves as a great bookend to his career. This story is also significant and can be considered one of several comics that signify the end of the Bronze Age of comics and the establishment of the modern age of comics. Number 4 is Batman Hush. I am going to admit there's a little bit of bias here. When you combine Jeph Loeb, who is my favorite Batman comic writer, and among my favorite writers overall, along with artist Jim Lee, who reimagined the X-Men in the early 1990s, I had a difficult time not judging and already liking a book just by its cover. Having said that, I did take the time to read this 2002 to 2003 story arc several times. We follow Batman as he confronts a new mysterious villain known as Hush, who works to disrupt the Batman from afar, initially doing things such as cutting his Batline and causing him to fall nearly to his death. Already, at the beginning of the story, we see Batman in an underdog scenario of sorts and having to fight back and needing the help of several allies. We see Bruce Wayne's childhood friend Thomas Elliot, now returning as a renowned surgeon and there to save Bruce's life via surgical means. We do see many members of Batman's rogues gallery, including the Joker, Clayface, and Poison Ivy, along with another confrontation between Batman and Superman. James Gordon returns as part of an emotionally driven plot point, and we have further developments in the romantic relationship between Bruce and Selina Kyle. Overall, though, the real gem here is the creation of Hush as a mysterious villain and his clever plots to ruin Batman by matching him in terms of creative intelligence without needing any of the more outlandishly insane characteristics of other members of Batman's rogues gallery. Number 3 is the Court of Owls. Okay, so Scott Snyder makes a second entry on this list, as this arc is the beginning of Snyder's extended run on Batman. The mystery-solving nature of this story is really what drives it to the top of my list for modern-day Batman tellings. It establishes the secret society of the Court of Owls as an underground cabal intent on committing crimes to maintain political power and influence. Their existence, once considered a conspiracy, seems to go back many generations, with their name mostly being known through a spooky nursery rhyme that is repeated throughout the course of this book. The court is even shown to have a connection to Bruce's ancestor, Alan Wayne. The court reveals itself through assassins known as the Talons, who can match Batman in combat, with the court's primary members wearing owl masks, the creature that they use as their symbolic avatar. What makes this book memorable and a repeat choice to read on my shelf is that the Batman comes out struggling to accept the urban legend mentioning the Court of Owls' existence to begin with. And what we are taken through then is a dark roller coaster of a tale where he comes face to face with his mysterious enemies who have now chosen to reveal themselves. The Batman is pushed to the brink in a plot where he is trapped in an intricate maze set up by the Court of Owls to drive him insane, causing him to fight an uphill battle and leaving readers wondering if he can indeed make it out alive. Talking about it here actually gives me the chills, so yes folks, give this one a read. I might just have to again once this video is finished. As we get to the top 2, the runner-up spot goes to Batman Year 1. Ah yes, what does Frank Miller do a year after releasing the timeless Dark Knight Returns in 1986? Of course, he returns the following year to bring us yet another top-notch classic, this time giving us a widely accepted Batman origin story. What's special about this is that it's in equal parts an origin story for the Batman as it is with establishing James Gordon, who comes to Gotham City from Chicago as a lieutenant. Gordon quickly realizes that members of the GCPD, including his own partner Detective Flass, are almost as corrupt as the criminals that they try to apprehend, and Gordon works to clean up not only the streets of Gotham City, but its police department as well. At the start of the story, Bruce Wayne is a young man who hasn't taken on the mantle of the Bat yet, but he's now returned to Gotham City after a long absence and training for his war on crime. After getting into a brawl, Bruce realizes what he lacks in combat is the ability to bring immediate fear to whomever he's battling, and the donning of the cape and cowl certainly gives him this advantage as the story progresses. At this point in his career, the long-term rogues gallery is not yet established, so much of Batman's war on crime is focused on the Falcone crime syndicate and corrupt GCPD Commissioner Loeb. We see some of these plot elements play themselves out in later forms of media, such as Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. As far as origin stories go for superheroes, there are few, if any, better than Batman Year 1. And before we get to number 1, I do need to bring up a few honorable mentions, as I had a hard time omitting them from this list, and if I had to do a more extended list, these would have been among my choices. Let's start with Nightfall. I read these stories as a 5th grader in 1993 as they came out, and watching a villain such as Bane brutalize the Batman and to see the character of Azrael take up the mantle of the Bat was quite refreshing. So Azrael at this point establishes himself as a force to be reckoned with in DC Universe. Batman Haunted Night. 3 stories on Halloween set early in the crime fighter's career. Halloween and Batman. Need I say much more? We also have Batman the Cult, a story of a captured Batman held prisoner by a man named Deacon Blackfire and his homeless band of followers. This follows the Batman's brainwashing process and his plan to escape, ultimately culminating in him confronting Blackfire one-on-one in front of Blackfire's Grand Army. And then we have Gotham Central. While not specifically a Batman-centric story, this 40-issue series by the talented Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka follows some of the day-to-day struggles and investigations done by the GCPD. While it is missing some of the titular and iconic characters, the storytelling is really what makes it a great recommendation. Another honorable mention is Batman Under the Hood, an emotional tale that tells the return story of an old friend, now a nemesis of Batman who is brandishing the anti-hero name of the Red Hood. This story has some key plot points that tie back to another memorable Batman story. And finally, we have Batman Birth of the Demon. I read this as part of the Ra's al Ghul trilogy that also included Son of the Demon and Bride of the Demon. But Birth of the Demon as a story arc specifically goes back in time and tells the tale of how Ra's al Ghul came to be. A story that alternates between past and present timelines. We do come to an exciting fight between Batman and Ra's at the site of a Lazarus pit. And we've come to the end of this list, and now I get to unveil my personal top choice for top Batman comic story of all time. Batman: The Long Halloween. Jeph Loeb makes this list yet again, this time as number 1. Much like its sequel series Dark Victory, The Long Halloween details a series of mysterious murders done by an unknown killer known simply as Holiday, who at this point no one has yet seen. The story starts with a murder on Halloween night, with subsequent murders taking place on national holidays thereafter, culminating and concluding on Halloween of the following year. This book explores the deep personal bond between Batman, James Gordon, and Harvey Dent to bring the Falcone crime syndicate to justice, all while fighting to discover just who is the Holiday killer to bring him or her to justice as well. Each subsequent murder of the Holiday killer leaves behind some clues, but the story really plays itself out as the ultimate detective tale, testing Batman's deductive skills to the limit. Many of the lines written by Jeph Loeb are direct homages to the Godfather movie, and in fact, the opening issue even begins with the line, "I believe in Gotham City," much like how the first Godfather film began with the words, "I believe in America." If you think you'll enjoy a combination of detective work with a unique series of connected murders on specific dates, with the Mafia at the forefront, then this story is for you. This story also doubles as something of an origin tale for Two-Face, with parts of it being an influence on the 2008 Dark Knight film. And as villains like the Joker and the Riddler get more established early in this tale of the Batman's history, The Long Halloween is very much a turning point as it gives a shift from Batman's villains being organized gangsters in the Mafia to being more akin to the lunatic villains that he faces and that would end up in Arkham Asylum. Yes, it is my favorite Batman story of all time, and the first graphic novel that I had of it actually fell apart quite ingloriously at the binding, though it didn't stop me from reading it over and over. Hopefully, my current copy stands the test of time, but even if it falls apart again, I'll still read it. Okay, and that was the list of my top 10 Batman stories of all time that I've read. Please, in the comments section, tell me your favorite stories, be it just one story, 3, 5, or 10 stories. Don't forget to subscribe. Press the like button on this video to spread it to more viewers, and I will see you again soon. Take care.